But our objectives for today are to go through the vision for the new science standards and how they fit with the vision for assessment and how the assessments that we are developing support that. And then the shifts in classroom instruction that are going to be necessary for the mastery of these new standards as assessed on the test. And then some logistic information about the field test design, including the different item types and set-based design, which is different for our science tests. And so we'll go through how the new assessment supports in the science instructional shifts, the field test design. We'll look at a sample task set and some resources and talk about next steps. So the LDOE is committed to raising expectations for students and having students prepared for the next level of learning, ultimately so that they're graduating on time, prepared for college and or a professional career. And so to meet that expectation, the LDOE has a variety of supports to educators, and one of those supports is through assessments, which is the work that we do. And we develop those quality assessments that are aligned to the standards that assess student mastery of the standards. And so our vision for assessment is a measurement of progress of student achievement that goes hand in hand with instruction, so that we're not thinking about assessment as some separate entity, but it really does support the shifts and the focus of classroom instruction.
Okay, hopefully by this time most of you, this is Dana Clinton by the way, but hopefully by this time most of you have looked at the new standards and you know, are fairly familiar with them. I'm hoping that. But what we want to point out is we have this standard, which is our performance expectation. And you know that in these standards there are three components: the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. The disciplinary core ideas is the content. What is it the kids are supposed to do once you master this standard? Science and engineering practices, I like to think about that as like science as inquiry, because they're doing some things that require some input from them, and it's a different aspect of learning the content. And the cross-cutting concepts are ideas that go across the discipline, learn certain things as we go through, you know, through our grades, and hopefully by the time they get into high school, they're very, very familiar with these cross-cutting concepts and these ideas.
Okay, I'm sorry, let's pause for just a second. We're hearing that, or we're seeing that some people may not be able to hear. If you can hear, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to change place?
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. These are the science shifts. What we want to do is we want to look at teaching our children in a different way that pretty much has them as the learner and performing on their own. Of course, teachers have to give a background and give content, but we want our kids, our ultimate purpose when we started all this was to have our children think like scientists, write like scientists, read like scientists. So we try to keep that theme as we go through and we look at developing these items and also instruction in the classroom. So we want to, most of our, well, I shouldn't say most, all of our standards are going to be a phenomena-based. We're going to take some phenomena and then that would match with the performance expectation, and then we have in the classroom and in assessment, we look at how does this phenomena affect, what can we, what dimensions can we apply to it, and we learn and we go from that. We want to do science more than learn about it. We want to integrate in science and engineering. We want to be able for the kids to come up with solutions to problems that are affecting us or the world. We want them to be able to do regurgitation, which we all know that our GLEs, that's pretty much what our students did was, just give us recall. And so what we're expecting is that these kids can learn these skills to be able to give us more than just a recall. We want them to go further than that. We want them to be able to think and reason and put that across in some kind of form, whether it be writing or verbally. We want them to be able to present their thoughts and their concerns and whatever to the teacher in that context. So when we talk about multidimensional alignment, we talk about the item or the standard being aligned to the dimensions. The DCI is the content knowledge, as I've said before. SEP is the engineering or scientific behavior, and the cross-cutting concept. What do we need to connect across the science domains? Now, when we look at items, the items can be aligned to 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. In our assessment, all items are 2-dimensionally aligned. There is not an item that is only aligned to 1 dimension. All of our items are aligned to 2. Our item sets are aligned to 2. They can be aligned to 3. But our test sets are all aligned to 3 dimensions. So what I'm saying to you is, even though we may have an item that is aligned to 2 dimensions, it could be that it could be aligned to another dimension, but you can choose which one is more aligned or goes with the item more than another. But it's not set in stone what alignment you use, because we have done presentations where teachers said, oh, I think it aligns to this, and another teacher said, well, I think it aligns to something else, and they're both correct. So you have the ability, with the way this is designed, you can have it to align to something that another teacher may not. So you have to keep that in mind. So it's not set in stone. If it's aligned to something, that doesn't mean it can't be aligned to another item. All right, this is an old GLE item. If you look at it, the GLE says, describe the difference between weather and climate. Again, this is a pretty much little recall. And here was the question, and they want to know, okay, yesterday it was cold, but the day before it was warm. What does this say? Very straightforward. We're just going to regurgitate the information back to you. So then what we have now is we have a new item. It's still talking about weather and climate, but if you'll notice, we are putting a lot more information out there for the student to look at, and we're asking for them to engage in the practice of argument and making a claim, and then they have to demonstrate the knowledge that humans can take to reduce the impacts of natural hazards. Now, I will tell you this, if you will notice that the blue, we've color-coded our items in our assessment guides, and the blue corresponds to a SEP, the orange color corresponds to a DCI, and the green corresponds to a cross-cutting concept. So if you look, this is still asking about weather and what we can do with what humans can do about the weather, but it's not just a simple regurgitation. The kids are going to have to think about it and say, yes, it's the best design, or no, and they have to have some reasoning involved. So these are our goals for the science assessment. These questions that we're using have been reviewed by Louisiana educators, and before they got to the educators, they went through a very thorough review from the department and the vendors. But what we wanted to make sure when we met with our teachers was that the items were grade level appropriate. They measured a full scale of what students can do, and when we create assessment, we always have to consider the low end of the scale and the high end of the scale. So when we're thinking about items like that, we have items that are very easy and some that are pretty difficult. but we have to keep that in mind to create a test that's fair. And that's what we want for all of our students. We want something that is fair for the whole gamut of what our ability of our students. And, excuse me, when we want to be able to let teachers know, educators know, parents about if our children are on track for college or for a career by using these assessments. All right, here are the features of the science field test. No kid is going to take an operational test this spring. It will be a field test only, grades 3 through 8. There are 2 sessions. Now, here is a major difference in the science assessment. Prior to this year, we had no time limit. We had suggested times, but our tests were not timed. They will be this year. We have suggested time limit, but we won't know a true, accurate time limit for operational until after we look at timing data. So just because we have a suggested time of maybe 60 minutes for one of the sessions, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be 60 minutes for operational. It could be less, it could be more. We have to look at timing data. The kids will be taking the test at the same test window as all the other grades for LEAP 2025. Grades 3 and 4, they do have the option for paper-based, but we do have online for grades 3 and 4 as well. And then, again, the items that will be on this field test have been reviewed by Louisiana educators for a grade level appropriateness and making sure they're aligned to the performance expectation that we have said it was aligned to. So here are times that we're allowing. And notice I have grades 3 and 4 are different from 5, even though that's considered elementary. The problem is in the task for grades 3 and 4, it's not worth as many points as it is in grade 5. So we wanted, starting in grade 5, to have a few more minutes for the kids to do the extended response because it's worth more points than grades 3 or 4. All right, these are the item types. Selective response, that's just a multiple choice, but we call it selective response, and it's 1 point. But we have 2 different kinds. We have just a regular multiple choice that has 4 answer options, 1 correct option, answer. But we have a multiple select. That means that there can be more than 1 answer to the question. And if you'll notice, it says in a multiple select, grade 3 and 4 will only have 5 options to choose from. Grade 5 will have 5 to 6 options. However, all multiple select, students will be told how many to identify. So in other words, if there's 2 correct answers, the students will be told, select the 2 correct answers. All right, so in this particular instance for the multiple select, it's going to be a little bit different when we get to the task, and I'll talk about that. Okay, these are the technology, the TEIs. I feel to these technology-enhanced items through the other disciplinary areas, and we're just late to the game. But these are the types that they can have. Drag and drop, which they take something and they put it in the correct place. An inline choice or a drop-down menu, they choose from that. Match interaction, and they just put it in somewhere in a table, and then a hot spot, they find something within the graphic. Now, the problem is if students are taking the grade 3 and 4 paper test, they don't have these items. Well, let me back up. They have these items, but they're not technology enhanced because we can't do that on paper. They will have the question, but they have to answer it in a different way than online. All right, here are we have something that's called 2-part items. I'm not sure if the other subjects have it, but we have what's called a 2-part dependent and a 2-part independent. Let's talk about the 2-part independent first, because this is a little bit easier to do. There are 2 parts to the question, but they don't rely on each other. So a student can get part A correct and get part B incorrect and still get partial credit. So A and B do not rely on each other. So they can, it's worth 2 points, but they can get 1 point out of it if one of them is wrong. The dependent, it means they are relying on each other. In other words, in Part A, they may be asked to select a solution for a problem. And in Part B, they'll say, what is the reason behind your answer selection? And so when it's a two-part dependent, if they get Part A correct and they get Part B correct, they get 2 points. They cannot get a point for Part B if they get Part A incorrect. Because if you get Part A incorrect, you should not be able to get an explanation correct. So it's very easy to get 1 point, but it can also very easy to get 0 points if they don't get Part A correct. Two-part independent doesn't matter.
Sorry, just doing the soundtrack real quick. Raise your hand if you're hearing an echo. Please raise your hand if you're hearing an echo. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, then. Oh, okay.
All right, so then here's our item types: constructive response, extended response. The CR is short. It's worth 2 points. It can be aligned 2 dimensions or 3, but it must be at least 2. And the extended response is more in depth. It's 6 points for grades 3 and 4, 9 points for grade 5. That's why we put more time for grade 5, because you're looking at more points for that answer. And an ER is absolutely aligned to 3 dimensions. All right, so with a set-based design, look at the phenomenon. We find a phenomenon, and you can find a phenomenon and then go into the standards and see if you find a standard that aligns, or that matches it. That's really kind of up to how you want to do that as far as your instruction. Once that has been done, however, you want to find stimulus materials, in which we do. We find those to describe that phenomenon. So we get some background information for the students to be able to answer some of these questions. An item set and a task set have 4 or 5 questions. And they use a stimulus material, and they have to use their own knowledge. This is one of the things that students will have to know, is they have to bring something to the table. They do have to have some knowledge to answer the questions. Those 4 to 5 questions can be selective response, they can be technology enhanced, 2-part questions. Some of the item sets will end in a 2-part constructive response. Some will not. But a task set will always have an extended response. An item set may or may not have a CR, but a task set will always have an ER. All right, so now we're going to look at some sample field items. Grade 5. And what we've done is these are in the field test guide. We've just taken some from the field test guide. And what we table in that field test guide, and it tells you the alignment that the items are aligned to. And so here is this task set. And there is the PEs. We have 2 PEs. We bundled PEs so that we could get more questions. And if you'll notice, the first item is a multiple select. It aligns to PS2-1, but it also, it goes to that standard, but it is aligned to a DCI and a SCP. The second item is just a multiple choice. It's aligned to a DCI and a CCC. So we put all of those there, so as you go through this task set, you will see what this item is aligned
although it is not the majority. But I would suggest maybe trying to put your phones on mute. If everybody could put their phone on mute in case some participants are picking up some background sound. I'm not exactly sure. Okay. Sorry, continue, Dana.
That's okay. These are the stimulus materials. All right. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. I learned something new. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So here's the first question. It's a multiple select, as in the table. It wants them to select the 2 correct answers. Remember, we said that we would let them know how many answers should be selected. But on the left here, you will see we've done an annotation. And they have to engage in argument. That's the SEP. And knowledge that the gravitational force of Earth acting on an object near Earth's surface, that's the DCI. So you'll notice that corresponds to that box prior to the task set. So we've included an annotation to let you know how it's aligned. Okay, this is the next one. This is just a plain multiple choice, but notice it's aligned to a DCI and a CCC, cause and effect. All right, this is a drop-down. This is one of the TEIs, and it is aligned to a DCI and a CCC. But what happens is the student clicks the little arrow. He has those choices to choose from. They choose which one they want, and it goes into that box. And that's why it's called a drop-down, an inline choice or a drop-down. This is where they're going to drag an image into the correct order of the sequences of a landslide. So they're given some information, then they're going to drag each of these images into first, second, third, and last. Notice, again, we have 2 dimensions, SEP and DCI. All right, here's our extended response. And remember I told you earlier that our ERs all had to be aligned to 3 dimensions. So we have all 3 dimensions here, an SEP. We have actually 2 DCIs, and we have a cross-cutting concept. Now, respond to the prompt. That's going to be in everything. That prompt is a general directions for the student. Address all of the instructions, use evidence from the information to support your response. So we have that as a general instruction for every one of the extended response, and we also have it for the constructive response. In this, we put the scoring, and this is a total across all parts. We have a maximum of 9 points. So it shows you that we have 2 points here for a total of 3 predictions, so that's 6 points, and then 3 points for constructing an argument. And we've kind of showed how they could get 3 points, 2 points, 1 point. So we put that in there as scoring notes. It's not technically a rubric as you would normally see. It's actually scoring notes because this is not holistic. It's very pointed, and, you know, hey, you get this or you don't get this. And that's how we wanted to address answers with science. So because science is pretty specific, so we wanted to do that. So that's why we have scoring notes rather than a rubric, a general rubric. Okay, I know I've gone through that quickly, but these are our resources. We have the shifts in science. We have some appendices that you can look at. We have professional development. All of these with our science field tests are on our website. The items that you saw today are in our assessment guides. We have all the assessment guides posted for you to look at, and they're in Word?
No, they're in PDF.
PDF, okay.
And then we're also going to have the OTT, the online tools training, coming out within the next couple months. So students will be able to practice with the items online, particularly those TE items.
So basically what we hope to see in the classroom is to make sure that you are integrating, incorporating these shifts that we're seeing, that we really need students to, you know, do some more writing, do some more reading, do some more communicating, rather than just a recall. NSTA Classroom Resources has a lot of lessons that you can look at to go along with the new science shift. I think you might find that valuable. But hopefully you can take these standards and these dimensions and try to incorporate something into the classroom where your kids are familiar with what it looks like and how it can align to different things, and you're talking about multiple things over one phenomena.
And so that kind of wraps it up. Thank you so much, Dana, for taking us through that. Appreciate it. Sorry I was a little slow with the slide changing, but glad you got it on your end, so that's great. We have time for a few questions. We've been answering as we go. A lot of it was sound issues, as I'm sure you picked up on. Our sincerest apologies for those of you who are having sound issues, although you probably can't hear me.
I will tell you this. If you do have questions, please address them at assessment@la.gov. If you'll send any questions you have about anything to assessment@la.gov, we'll get it and we will answer.
Yeah, and the PowerPoint for this presentation will be posted to the website tomorrow. I'm sending it for posting this evening. They'll get it up tomorrow. It'll be this presentation, the one for tomorrow for 6 through 8, and then the one for Thursday for biology. All of those will get posted tomorrow. The recordings, it takes about 2 weeks, but in about 2 weeks they'll be posted in the same location in the Assessment Guidance Library, which is currently where the science field test guides are. One for each grade, and each grade has its own set of sample items for you to look at.
Are there any questions before we wrap up? Does anybody have anything they would like to ask us?
Just fill it in the question box.
Okay.
I'm going to put us on mute for just a minute so that we can read through these real quick.
Right. I'm going to just kind of go through some of them real quick that I can. One of the items be available. We are in talks about Eagle items right now, but I can't for that. There was a question about scope and sequence. There are scope and sequence on the website already. It doesn't have everything there, but there are some lessons for the scope and sequence. So that's available in the content part of it.
I'm sorry, as someone pointed out to me just now, the PowerPoints are available here down in the download box on the bottom right of the page. I have each one of them. I completely forgot I did that. Thank you.
Yeah. So Eagle right now doesn't have the new items for the science. Question was, will the scores for science be used from last year? No. This is a standalone. It is not, the scores will not be used from last year. This is a year away from scores, okay, because it's still test only. I don't know what's going to happen with the science SPS for this year. I don't know that a decision has been made about that.
Please email that to assessment@la.gov, and that'll get routed to the right person.
Right. Districts that are given paper tests, should they prepare their students using the same resources? Yes, absolutely. The difference between the paper and the online is that the paper doesn't have the kids can't do TEI. The questions are there, they're just having to answer them just a little bit differently. Are there any resources for assessment similar to the middle school task? I'm not aware of any. I know that they did middle school, but I'm not sure that they did any 3 through 5.
And the PowerPoint for this presentation is going to be posted in the Assessment Guidance Library, but it is also here in Adobe Connect at the bottom right of the screen. You can download the file there. It is a PowerPoint picture presentation rather than a PowerPoint that you can manipulate. So what will be posted will be a PowerPoint that you can add into the notes section and manipulate like a regular PowerPoint.
Okay, the question was asked about, will we have any knowledge to know how they did? How will we know if they're successful or unsuccessful? This being a field test, there's no reporting.
We gather data, and the field test is not necessarily performing with the items. It's about how the items themselves are performing. We have an idea if an item is going to be difficult, if an item is going to be easy, if it's going to be middle of the road. But until students are actually answering the questions and answering the items, we don't know for sure. And so that's the purpose of the field test, is for us to gather data and information about the test items. So there will be no reporting for the students, no reporting to the schools about student performance, because that's not the goal of the field test.
Okay. They've asked about the Science 2025 practice test. It is not available yet. We are in the process of starting the practice tests, but I can't give you a...
It will be available for the next school year, the 2018-2019
Right, but we are in the process of doing practice tests, so you will have one for next year, because then next year it will be operational, so that you'll have a practice test. The tasks that we looked at, if you go into our website and go to library and do assessment guidance, all of the assessment field test guides are posted there under science. That's where you will find them. Question is, what technology-based resources can we use to prepare third and fourth graders ready for drag and drop? Go ahead.
So the OTTs will be a great source for that. They are also can go into the OTTs for the other subject areas, ELA, math, social studies. They have drag and drop items. The technology enhanced, I couldn't think of the words, item information document that is on the assessment library, in the assessment library, gives exact information on what types of technology enhanced items are found in each type of OTT. And then also you have the practice test for the other courses. So, I mean, those kids are taking tests in math and ELA and social studies, so they can still practice with drag and drop down menu and all the other different technology enhanced item types in those practice tests as well. So they can with it. And, you know, our fourth graders, if they took the test online for third grade, then they already have some familiarity with it when they come into fourth grade as well. Although, by and large, most of our third and fourth graders are paper testers anyway.
A question was asked about the resource, NSTA resource link doesn't work. What you have to do is you have to actually put the PowerPoint in presentation mode, and when you do that, then the link will work. It won't work if you're not in presentation mode. We're not putting any literacy expectations for students as it concerns their writing, because we are not going to be scoring students on their grammar or if it's in a paragraph form. We expect that from the classroom. We expect that teachers would ask them to write correctly. But being as this is a science assessment, we are concerned about, do they know the science content and not how they present it to us. But I would hope that teachers would be doing that in their classroom. There's a question about the scope and sequence. There's already some scope and sequence on the website, and I don't know when others will be completed, if that's a question. But there are already some scope and sequence documents on our website. I just don't know what grade span they are. That's the content people. On the question about other tasks, you can go to NSTA, but I will also tell you that there are other states that are releasing some tasks, and you can go to other states and find some of their release tasks that they're using. Now, I don't know if they're going to be in the same format as ours, but at least it's a task. So you might check other states as well. No, our bundle Ps may not be the same bundles in the scope and sequence. I think that if they're not, they will be very similar, because they they mesh with each other, they go with each other. But I'm not going to say that those are the exact bundles. To be honest with you, I haven't looked at the scope and sequence, really dug into it, so I don't know what bundles they're using. But we kind of work hand in hand, and we make sure that, you know, our bundles do work together. So I don't know whether they'll match or not, because there's a lot of ways to bundle these things where they work together.
Okay, great. If you find that, you know, you come up with a question later, please email assessment@la.gov. It'll get routed likely to one of us, although if it is an SPS question, it'll get routed to the correct people who can provide you with the correct answer. So please just send your further questions to assessment@la.gov. Thank you so much for participating. We have a packed room. And have a great week.
Louisiana Department of Education. On the web, go to www.louisianabelieves.com or call 1-877-453-2721.